Well, God bless you. Welcome to Pastor Jerone TV. I'm your host, Pastor Jerome. Go ahead and like, share, and comment on this video. Looking forward to teaching this day. I want to talk to y'all about the prophet Hosea and unreturned love. I think that's probably one of the most painful loves in the world. That is to have unreturned love after you have shown love, you have desired love, you have expressed love, you have all of these good feelings toward a person, you have all of these good dreams, good visions, just good vibes for them, and yet they have not returned that love. A lot of times this happens in marriages, this happens with our friends, happens a lot of times with our children. We can show them love, but they just can't find it in their hearts to return that to you. And I believe that's what the lesson that the book of Hosea is teaching us. The book of Hosea is teaching us that God is the one who is loving us, but yet we haven't returned that love back to him. And this book also expresses to us the feelings of God, that God certainly does have emotions, that God certainly does have love, and he is faithful and loyal to his covenant partners. Well, that's what we're going to be teaching for now. We're going to teach that on the book of Hosea for here. And Hosea became acquainted with the heart of God because God took him through the school of learning into his experiences. And God often did this with the prophets. He used their marriages. God used the marriages of the prophets to train them in the school of the heart and the feelings of God. You know, take for example, you have the prophet Jeremiah. God forbid that he marry. In the book of Jeremiah, chapter 16, God told the prophet Jeremiah, he says, you shall not marry. I'm forbidding you to marry because what I want you to understand is that now I'm a bachelor. And I want you to express through your life to Israel that I'm no longer married to them. So he forbid and what a sacrifice for the prophet Jeremiah to go without life and to experience that type of loneliness. And that's what God really wanted him to experience. God wanted him to experience his loneliness without Israel. See, God has a lot of feelings. God has a lot of love and a lot of feelings. And the prophet, which made them such great ministers of the love and of the message of God, because they felt God's emotion in God's heart. Then take, for example, Ezekiel. In Ezekiel chapter 24, Ezekiel had a wife, and Ezekiel was fairly a young man. And God came to him one day and said, Ezekiel, I know you love your wife, but I'm getting ready to take her away. And she's going to die of a stroke. He says, but I don't want you to mourn for her. I don't want you to weep. Because what I want Israel to understand is that I'm going to let them go, and I'm not going to feel bad about letting them go. And God continued to warn them through all these prophets. And a lot of these prophets were contemporary to one another. And so God kept warning them, but his love for them would not allow him to move forward with it for a long time, but he eventually did it. So he sent other prophets. So what about the prophet Isaiah? The prophet Isaiah, we know about him and his wife. Only thing we know about his wife's name was that her name, he just called her prophetess. And then they had a son, and his son was a message too. And his name was Mar-ha-Shalal-Akbaz. And his name was to mean that God was getting ready to send an invasion army, and they're going to take your possessions. And so these are the things that God had to experience, his prophets to experience in their marriages. And so it's interesting, as I've read many various expositions on the book of Hosea, and some were interesting and some were not so interesting. But I think what's more interesting is to watch the varying or changing vicissitudinous dispositions of the prophets when they're dealing with their marriages and dealing with the message for God. And Hosea, probably out of all the prophets, had the most extraordinary example to marry a woman of whoredoms and a woman who was in the streets. And he experienced the brokenheartedness of having an unfaithful partner. And that was very painful for him. But he had to do it because God was sending a message through him to his unfaithful partner, Israel. So, examining the book of Hosea, you'll see in chapter 1, it's taken up with the names of the children. The children. In chapter 2, it's taken up with Gomer, his wife. And then in chapter 3, it is an autobiography of all 3 chapters of Hosea, the prophet. So it's an autobiography, with chapter 1 being about the children, chapter 2 being about the wife, and chapter 3 being about Hosea himself. And then the rest of the book is Hosea's message. So let's look at the names of Hosea's children. In chapter 1, you'll see the name of Jezreel or Jezreel. And his name was to express God plants, which means this child Jezreel was unruly and he needed discipline, and it was going to be God who planted discipline upon them. So in naming him his first child Jezreel, a boy, he named him that God is going to plant discipline on you. And then the second one was a girl. Her name was Lorahama, and her name meant not pitied. And the message was God was sending to them that once I send this judgment, I'm not going to pity what these invading armies are going to do to you. She was pitied because she was deprived. The first one, he was disciplined. Lorahama was deprived because she was deprived of her mother's love. The mother was so busy in the streets that she deprived the daughter of her love. And then the third child, his name was Loami, and it was a boy, and his name meant not mine. And this wasn't the child of Hosea, and Hosea knew that this was not his. God was letting him know that this wasn't your child, it was by another man. And so he was disowned. So the first one needed discipline, the second one was deprived of love, and the third one was disowned. And all of these things, God was sending a message to Israel, is that I'm going to discipline you. I'm not going to pity you. I'm not going to pity you, and you're going to be deprived of my love. And then number 3 is that I'm going to disown you. You're not going to be mine. That was a powerful message. And these were the examples that Hosea had to go through. And you know Hosea was hurt by that child not being his. Amen? That child was not his. But in chapter 2, God gives us a glimpse of the things that he wanted us to know about Gomer, his wife. For one, she was rebuked. All right, her children rebuked her for her activity outside of her marriage. Even her children rebuked her. And then number 3 is that she returned. The prophet went and bought her back. So God was showing us that she was returned. And then eventually she was restored. So she was rebuked, she was returned, and she was restored. And so that's the thing about that. And then the 3rd chapter, we see this about the prophet. Although she was unfaithful to him, he was faithful to her. He was loyal. There's a lot of people out there listening to me right now who knows the pain of not having that love returned. You're acquainted with that feeling. And so many people cannot be disloyal. They can't be disloyal. They have loyalty in them. And these are people who normally experience this unreturned love, because what ends up happening is that the person that you're in this covenant of love with, this relationship with, they see your loyalty and they know that you're not going to be disloyal to them, so they take it for granted. This book of Hosea is a greater glimpse into the feelings of God, and less about the activities of the wife, and less about the activities of the prophet. But this was a focus on the love, the emotions, the intentions of God towards his people, and his people not loving him back. You see, this is why God raised the prophet up to marry this woman who was a woman of the night. And so she would go out there and be unfaithful, and yet the prophet remained faithful to her. God is faithful to his covenant. It's just the people who are in covenant with him so many times are not faithful to him, and they don't return the same love, right? So we know he's faithful. And then in chapter 3, he was firm with her. When he got her back, he went and brought her back, and he told her, says, now, you will not be unfaithful to me anymore, okay? You will be faithful, and you will dwell with me for many years, all right? And I with you, and I will do the same to you. He was firm. And then in chapter 3, or the third thing about him is that he was feared. She had a reverence and a respect for him eventually as she was restored. So he was faithful, firm, and feared. Now, before I conclude, God had a controversy. And his controversy with them was that he wanted to get rid of them. He kept pronouncing the end of their marriage, the end of their covenant relationship. But his controversy was that he loved them. And he says, how can I get rid of you? How can I let go of you? I love you so much. And so he had a controversy with Israel. Eventually, he allowed a invading army coming in through the later prophets. But through Hosea, his controversy was, I love you so much and I'm so loyal to you, but why won't you be faithful to me? Okay? Now, before I read the conclusion, this is the last, I'm going to read to you the last chapter of Hosea. And this was God's feeling. Y'all heard of the Lord's Prayer, how Jesus taught the disciples to pray. But Hosea, through God told them and gave them a cheat sheet on how to come back to me. Let me give you the words and tell you how to come back to me, and then I will receive you. Just come to me and repeat these words. This is what God told him. Just come to me and say these words, and I'll love you. I'll forgive you. I'll have you back to me. But before I read that, have you donated to the prayer conference yet? Have you sent a donation? Have you go to my PayPal link and contribute something and be a blessing to a work of God? We're going to have a prayer conference here in the city of Phoenix, and it's going to be so, so powerful. We're going to be baptized and filled and blessed by the presence of God and the love of God. The awesomeness of the Spirit of the Lord is going to be with us. So contribute that. Send any gift size, 5, 10, whatever amount God lays on your heart, sow that and be a blessing. And when October comes, we're going to have a kingdom moment together that is going to be of excellence. All right? It's not going to be something thrown together. It's going to be of excellence because people like you took the time out to sow a seed, a financial seed, to make sure that God's kingdom is represented well here in the earth. Amen? So now, I want to read to you what God says. Okay, Jesus gave his disciples a prayer, but God gives Israel a prayer to come back to him. And this is what it says. Hosea chapter 14, and this is God's conclusion. At the end of it all, God is still, and he's pronounced doom on them, and he's pronounced that he's divorcing them and he's letting them go. Before he leaves the book, he shows them one more time how much he loves them. This is what he does. Hosea chapter 14, it's 9 verses. He says, O Israel, return unto the Lord thy God, for thou hast fallen by thine iniquity. He says, take with you these words and turn to the Lord and say unto him, take away all iniquity and receive us graciously, so will we render with the calves of our lips. Asher cannot save us. We will not ride upon horses, neither will we say any more to the works of our hands, ye are our gods. For in thee the fatherless finds mercy and tender. I will heal, then God says, and then I will heal their backslidings. I will love them freely, for mine anger is turned away from him. I will be as the dew upon Israel. He shall grow as a lily and cast forth his roots as Lebanon. His branches shall spread, and his beauty shall be as the olive tree, and his smell as Lebanon. They that dwell under the shadow shall return. They shall revive as the corn. They shall grow as the vine. The scent thereof shall be as the wine of Lebanon. Ephraim shall say, what have I to do any more with any idols? I have heard him and observed him, and I am like a green fir tree. From me thy fruit is found. Who is wise, and who shall understand these things? Prudent, and he shall know them. For the ways of the Lord are right, and the just shall walk in them, but the transgressors shall fall therein. What a beautiful, beautiful book. A book of unreturned love. Well, don't let God's love be wasted on you. Return God's love back to him and be loyal, be faithful to a great, loving God. I'm Pastor Jerome, looking forward to seeing you at the prayer conference in October. God bless you.